Over the past 2.5 years, I have done quite a bit of traveling. As a matter of fact, since the start of 2023, I have been to 8 different countries, and here in the next few months, I will be visiting country number 9. I'm saying this to say that I have experienced quite a bit of culture shock over the past couple of years. More culture shock than I ever did in all the previous years of my life combined. But the country that shocked me the most out of all of those countries that I visited was actually my home country, the United States of America. You see, when I visited Europe, Spain, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Belgium, UK, when I arrived in Asia, visited Japan on a layover, Thailand, when I visit Vietnam here in the next few months, I knew in the back of my mind that these were foreign countries. So although I experienced a great deal of culture shock, I kind of expected it, and it made sense that I felt the way I felt. Returning to the US after living in the Netherlands for 14 months was the most strange and bizarre feeling maybe ever in my life that I've ever experienced, simply because I viewed a place that I had always known as my home, as the most familiar, comfortable place, as completely foreign for the first time in my life. And that's a feeling that I reckon a lot of Americans who travel overseas experience as well. Bearing that in mind, in this video, I'm going to be reacting to various videos of Americans experiencing reverse culture shock after traveling to or living abroad. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this first video.
Reverse culture shock in the US, part 1. As you know, I live in Paris, and this is my first time back in the US in over 2 years, so there's a lot of things that are kind of shocking to me that I didn't notice before or just forgot about. So kicking it off with food, I always talk about the sugar. Like bread and ketchup are the 2 big ones. Whenever I come home, I can't eat it. It tastes weird because there's so much sugar in it. Okay, I knew that. Didn't expect the salt situation. I was at my friend's house and they had Ruffles potato chips, and I had one and I had to spit it out because it was so salty. And I'm not being dramatic. I love potato chips. We have them in.
Just imagine her being at her friend's house and just spitting this potato chip all over her kitchen table. Just think about that for a second. But it's kind of interesting. I didn't really experience that much of this. I think because I don't really pay attention to the food I eat. I pay attention to it, but I don't think that much about the taste. I don't think much about the flavor. I think more in terms of the macros. I think in terms of how many calories and protein the food has. And if the taste is passable, then it's passable. But I honestly never really noticed the bread being a lot sweeter or anything like that. I don't really eat ketchup like that. And as far as potato chips and stuff, I don't really eat a whole lot of that either. But my girlfriend definitely pointed that out. She said that the bread tasted a lot different in the US, and that's something I've heard a lot of Europeans say as well. I think Europeans in general just have much more advanced palates than Americans, or at least me. I don't really have a very well-developed palate. I just eat whatever is in front of me, as long as it fits in my macros. But that's a very, very interesting scene, just spitting that potato chip all over that table.
In France, I eat them, couldn't eat it because it was so salty. And then at dinner last night, I had pasta with sausage. I cook with sausage all the time. Same thing, spat it out, couldn't eat it. Wow, the sodium over here, wow.
It doesn't surprise me though. It doesn't surprise me. Again, I haven't experienced that much of that myself, but it doesn't surprise me because, of course, European countries generally have much more stringent requirements in terms of food quality. In other words, if the food will shorten your life expectancy, they probably won't allow it. So that's probably the reason why she experienced that. But again, maybe it's just because I don't really eat a whole lot of that kind of food in general, that I didn't really experience that myself. But I do feel like the food in Europe tasted better though. I do feel like the food in Europe tasted better. Granted, when I went home, my mom was also cooking, so of course, I'm a little biased in that regard because nothing beats mom's cooking, but that's something that I did notice in terms of pre-packaged foods, things of that nature. The food in Europe generally tastes better, and it's a lot cheaper on top of that. On to the next video, which is also from the same person.
Reverse culture shock in the US, part two. Now, this one's hard because I didn't notice this when I lived in the US, and when I heard people say it, I used to get pissed off. I was like, you're judgmental, like, mm-mm. And now that I've been away for 2 years and I'm back, it's real. Americans scream. I love you guys, but you are screaming constantly. Screaming. You know, in Paris, when there's an American on the train, the entire train can hear them because they're screaming. And I always thought, maybe they're just excited to be on vacation. I don't know. That's not it, because I'm here and everyone is screaming. I had to tell my friend the other day, I was like, babe, honey, you're screaming. And she was like, oh my God, I'm sorry. And I'm like, yeah. Last night at the restaurant, I could barely hear my friend because all around us, we are surrounded by people screaming. Screaming. I get it. You're excited. You've got a lot to say. But guys, I hate to break it to you. Americans are very loud. And you know, we can just take it down like a little. Like we can be excited down here. Do you know what I mean? Again, I used to be offended by this, but I'm sorry. It's true.
So we can be excited down here. So I definitely agree with her that Americans are a lot louder. That was one of the biggest things I noticed in Switzerland, particularly when I visited Zurich on a layover back in 2023 on the way back to the US. I was so shocked at how quiet it was in spite of it being a dense urban environment where you have a lot of people out and about walking. It really blew my mind how quiet people were out there. Spain was a little bit louder, but still not as loud as the US. But I don't really know why this is the case. I really resonated with what she said about the restaurant situation. Anytime you put Americans in an enclosed space, if you don't know how to project your voice, you're not going to get your message across to the person you're talking to. You're just not. And that was something that whenever my girlfriend and I were traveling around the US, it actually became a bit of a running joke throughout those vlogs that people couldn't hear her because we were in such loud environments where people were speaking really loudly. But also, I think part of the reason why Americans tend to speak so loud is because the environments they're in are louder. But a big part of the reason why the environments they're in are louder is because they're speaking so much louder than Europeans would in that same environment. So it's kind of a chicken or egg situation. But something I did notice as well is that it seems like in American public spaces, they have this affinity for really loud music, which I'm not gonna lie, really frustrates the hell out of me. I don't know if I'm just getting to that age where loud noises just piss me off a lot more than they used to, or if it's because now I've experienced being in Europe and I know what it's like to not have those loud noises. But hearing that excessively loud music really bothered me because it made it a necessity to speak loudly. So I think that could be part of the reason why some Americans speak so loud is because they're typically just in loud environments with loud music. Where, let's say for example, if you're at a club or something, I don't go to clubs, I don't do bars, clubs, social situations, anything of that nature. But let's say if you're at a club, a lot of times you have to project your voice in order for people to hear you, even if they're right next to you. And again, I've noticed this even in restaurants or just walking down the street or at the beach or wherever else. So again, it could be more of a chicken or egg situation, but it seems like maybe Americans just have a higher tolerance for loud noise. And because of that, they simply push the limits further than Europeans will. I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas here because I'm trying to make sense of it myself. I don't really know why this is the case. But if I had to guess, it's probably because the environment is so much louder. But again, they're the reason why the environment is so much louder. On to the next video. Athleisure, that's definitely a very big American thing. I never really saw that in Europe, now that I think about it. I never really saw that in Europe. People in Europe just have a drip in general. They have drip. Okay, I've never been to a place where people dress that nicely. I'm sure that maybe some places in Asia might give them a run for their money, maybe Korea, Japan, etc. But of the places I've been to and actually traveled around, Europeans, and this applies to every country in Europe that I went to, they have a fashion sense unlike anything I've seen in the US. You have to go to New York to see that kind of fashion in the US. And that's because New York fashion is heavily influenced by European fashion. I think the athleisure thing is more a function of Americans just being lazy. Because if I'm being honest, I still go out in sweatpants all the time, especially if I'm just walking to the 7-Eleven across the street or going to do laundry at the laundromat here in Thailand. I'm gonna wear sweatpants or shorts because it's too hot to be doing all those layers. But rest assured that from the moment I land on a European runway, I'm going to be dripped out to the best of my ability. All the athleisure, all the sweatpants and stuff, that is staying in the suitcase, in the closet, or at the gym. Those portion sizes are definitely very, very different, especially for drinks. I feel like the food portion sizes, maybe it's because I'm vegan and I primarily go to vegan restaurants, they weren't that different in the US compared to Europe. There are a few places that definitely had larger portion sizes, but those were places that were known for having larger portion sizes. But the drinks were definitely very, very different. Very different situation. In Europe, a lot of times, of course, the restaurants, they make most of their profit from the drinks, not from the food. So they're going to tax you for every single refill that you get. And the cups will be around yay big. I always get a water everywhere I go. I only really drink water. So the cups will be about this big. In the US, your cup's going to be about this big. They're going to fill it with a bunch of ice, so it's going to have less water in it. But of course, as the ice melts, that's just more water. And you can ask for it without water. And there are free refills. But again, that's simply because of how the profits are made in Europe versus in the US. The US, they profit off of, well, labor. I mean, basically damn near slave labor, because they're paying servers something like $2 to $3 an hour in a lot of restaurants. Whereas in Europe, they actually pay the servers a decent wage, maybe not enough to buy a mansion, but a fair wage for their services, and they simply profit off of the drinks. So whenever you get that refill, even though it may seem like you're spending a lot more on drinks or like you're being shorted for your money, in all actuality, when you measure that against the tip you would probably be paying in the US if you're a decent person with morals, then you're probably breaking even at worst, coming away better in Europe at best. Look, I'm not gonna lie, that bathroom stall situation, with that big crack on the side of the door, that is very, very uncomfortable in American restrooms. I really, really hate that, especially growing up in school when you would be trying to sneak one in between class periods or maybe during class, whatever, and a bunch of just hooligans come in the bathroom causing trouble, trying to rattle the door and things like that. That's the worst. That is the absolute worst. And not to mention that big gap at the bottom. I don't understand why they do that. I guess it's because they don't profit off of the bathroom, so they want to cheap out on the materials. But honestly, after being in the public restrooms in Japan, at the airport, at Narita Airport, I can never look at American restrooms the same. Even European restrooms pale in comparison, but American restrooms are definitely at the bottom of the list thus far. I heard that the card thing throws a lot of Europeans off when they visit America. And now that I think about it, for somebody who wants to just steal money from people, I feel like working at a restaurant is probably a pretty good job to have. And I'm not trying to give anybody any ideas, but now that I think about it, I'm surprised that this doesn't happen a lot more frequently than it does. I've never had it happen to me, nor have I heard of it happening to someone. But I did work at a restaurant before. I worked at IHOP. And honestly, I didn't see any real preventative measures for keeping something like this from happening. So I'm not gonna lie, out of all the things that we've seen thus far in the video, this right here, the supermarket situation, that's probably served as the single greatest reverse culture shock for me when I went back to the US after living abroad for 14 months, because Walmart, Target, they do not have anything even remotely similar to that in the Netherlands, or really probably anywhere in Europe as far as I'm aware. Here in Thailand, they do have a somewhat similar store. It's called Big C, but even that is a little less extensive in terms of the options that you have. It's kind of like a Walmart, but you just don't have quite as many options. Very, very different experience going through a place like this compared to, let's say, an Albert Heijn, Jumbo, Aldi, or Co-op, any European grocery store that you might find in any country in Europe. And honestly, as far as which one I prefer more, I think I prefer the European stores more. I think I prefer the European grocery stores more simply because a lot of these extra options, I mean, you can't really see that much of it right here, but a lot of these extra options are things that I am never going to consider buying. More often than not, when you know that a product is good, when you like a product, you're just going to keep buying that same product over and over again, or as similar to that product as you can, maybe the store brand version of that same product. So I don't really see the need for having all of these options when it's like, okay, you have all of these drinks, I'm just gonna get water. Or you have a bunch of different cereals, but I'm gonna eat the same 2 to 3 cereals over and over again. So I don't know, it just seems like kind of a waste of space for me. But if you've been to American grocery stores and European grocery stores, let me know which one you prefer in the comments below.